What a bad week for Connecticut's capital city. Its mayor standing trial as part of a corruption scandal, giving folks all across the country yet another reason to crack a joke about our state and its history of politicians battling prosecutors. With us here today to give us some insight into the trial of Mayor Eddie Perez is Channel 3's Eric Parker. We should point out that Eric is a law student, and in a couple of months after you pass the bar, you'll be an official lawyer.
May 23rd, not that I'm counting. I'll be an official law school graduate.
Well, congratulations.
Then I got to take the bar.
In advance.
Thank you.
I want to ask you, first of all, and you reported this week that the racial makeup of the jury was very important to both sides. Why?
Well, that was a big issue for the mayor's lawyers because they draw jurors from all throughout Hartford County, not just the city of Hartford. So you get jurors from Farmington, from Avon, from Simsbury, places where the racial makeup of the community is very different than in Hartford. So he was concerned about how that would be. It's a total random process. We've been in jury selection the first 3 days as they picked the regular jury, all 6 regular jurors. Every day there was a good representation of minorities on the jury. About a third of each panel of 35 were minorities from different places, some from Hartford, some from outside Hartford. But I think they were relieved to see that. It's a totally random process, but they were very concerned that it wouldn't be a jury of the mayor's peers. That's what they were saying. And I think they're happy that they've gotten some minority representation.
Eric, how does this work? How long are they on the stand for while they're being asked about whether they can be a juror?
First, it's a 2-part process. They bring all the jurors in at once, and they read off a list of all the possible witnesses, a list of the lawyers that will be involved in the case, so that if someone's neighbor is going to be a witness or someone's relative, brother-in-law, they can raise their hand and say, hey, I can't sit on this case because I know whoever. Then the jurors leave and they come back into the room one at a time. It's something pretty unique in Connecticut. Individual voir dire of all the witnesses. And the lawyers get to ask them questions, get to ask them, what do you like politicians? Do you have any relatives who are police officers? Have you ever been a victim of a crime? Things that might reveal a bias that the juror might have and give a clue about whether they can sit fairly and impartially on the case. And they go through juror after juror until 5 o'clock every day.
And as we have also reported, Hubie Santos, the mayor's attorney, originally was talking about maybe having the trial in another location. Let's say he doesn't like the jury when this is all done. Even though he has a role in help picking it, can he say he doesn't want it?
Well, he was very clear. He never asked for a change of venue.
Okay.
He simply asked for permission to later ask for a change of venue. And the prosecutor said it was, have your cake and eat it too, that he would wait and see what the jury looked like and then ask. Judge Julia Dewey is presiding over the trial. She's known around the courthouse as a good judge, as a smart judge. She was pretty clear. It would be highly irregular to ask for a change of venue after the jury's picked, to say, oh, now that I see the jury, now I want to go try again. But she did say she'll entertain any motion that they make. He has been very clear. They did pick a Hispanic juror on the first day, a 27-year-old man. He's a cell phone store manager, grew up in Hartford lifelong. I think that right there made the mayor's camp feel like they weren't just going to get a suburban jury that wouldn't understand what happens in the city of Hartford. So right from the get-go, I think they felt a little better about things.
And who's in the courtroom during this? Is it filled?
The first day it was filled. A lot of curiosity, obviously, with the mayor of the capital city being in there every day for this. The lawyers are all there, of course, the 2 state's attorneys, the 2 defense attorneys, as well as the mayor. His wife's been there every day. And then for most of the week, it's been reporters. There's been, reporters from the newspapers and the TV stations and things like that. There's been some show of support, some community leaders. Reverend Cornell Lewis was in. He stopped in for one day and watched. People like that. But it hasn't been packed except for that first day where I think was more a curiosity factor. I think that'll change when we get to actual testimony when the trial begins.
What do we know about the witness list?
Well, they tell the jurors all the possible witnesses. They tell you everybody who might have any chance of being there. They don't want to get halfway through the trial and have someone say, oh, my neighbor's now going to testify. A lot of inspectors from the state's attorney's office, a lot of Hartford politicians, most of the city council may be called to testify. All the co-defendants, people like Carlos Costa, Abe Giles, people that aren't involved in this particular case but been involved in this same probe have all been listed. So we've seen a lot of those folks that you would recognize from city politics.
Do we know if the mayor's going to take the stand yet?
We don't, and that's something that they'll never tell you until the very last second. Yeah. It's a very touch-and-go thing for defense lawyers, whether you have your client testify or not testify. They tell the jury right from the beginning, even when they first walk in, the panel, a lot of people aren't even going to be picked, that this is, the mayor's case and he has the right as a criminal defendant, Fifth Amendment right to not testify. They tell you that the very first day. So the jurors will hear that over and over and over. that, hey, this guy may not testify, just like any criminal defendant may not testify. So it's often not a surprise if they don't. The jury doesn't usually react. We've seen cases where the jury, when the defense stands up and says, Your Honor, the defense rests, and the defendant hasn't testified, sometimes you can see a reaction. The jury's surprised that that hasn't happened, but no clue yet. That'll be the last possible second.
And there were some surprising questions that the jurors were asked, right? Well,
it's surprising and far-ranging. I mean, everything from one of the questions, have you ever watched Law & Order? What do you think about politicians? What do you think about political patronage? That was actually one that was a big issue because the judge sort of suggested that maybe that goes a little bit towards the ultimate issue in this case and not something, but it ended up being allowed. What's your party affiliation? Are you a Republican? Are you a Democrat? The wide range of things. What kind of books do you like to read? Just anything that would give these lawyers a clue about what type of juror this person will be.
What is the mayor's demeanor during all this? Is he taking notes? Does he seem bored? Does he seem fascinated? I mean,
it's inherently a boring process, I think, when you're in there. Once you've been through a couple of them, I think any lawyer would tell you it's not a particularly thrilling process for the people who are in the room. But the mayor's, I've watched him, he's watching very closely. They actually asked the witnesses, the jurors, to slide forward in the witness box because the mayor's view was cut off. He couldn't get a good look as these folks were answering the questions. So he's obviously paying a lot of attention. I mean, there's obviously a lot at stake here. After each person finishes, they all caucus, the two defense attorneys and the mayor, and talk about each person. So he's paying close attention, very stoic. At the beginning of each session, they have him stand up so that all of the witnesses in the room can see, who he is and know who they're talking about. Expressionless, just stands up, looks around, sits back down. So not a lot of emotion from the mayor, but certainly he's paying very close attention.
Will cameras be in the courtroom for the trial?
For the trial, they will. We're not allowed to show jurors ever, so voir dire doesn't make much sense for us to be there, but when the trial begins, we'll be in the courtroom.
Yeah, it is fascinating to watch the jurors. I remember the O.J. Simpson trial. I watched them, and there were at least two I just knew who were going to acquit O.J. Simpson, just by the way that they looked at the prosecutors, and you could just sort of tell by, and some weren't interested at all. I imagine after all those months.
And we have just the first two of the first six that we know of. We have a doctor from Hartford Hospital. Very rare to have a doctor because usually their schedules preclude. I mean, this is a possible 6-week trial. So a doctor, so someone very, very well educated. I mentioned a cell phone store manager. We have one woman who said that she's a rape victim. And a lot of times you don't get crime victims on juries. So a very wide range of people we're seeing.
All right. So a 6-week trial, of course. Several people have called for the mayor to step down, at least temporarily, during this whole procedure. He says he will not, that he's going to work at night and on the weekends and so forth. And there was an effort at the city council this week to try to remove him. Where does that stand and what could happen?
Well, that was a resolution Councilman Larry Deutsch put forward, and we asked the mayor about it. He didn't want to talk about it. All he said is that stuff's up to the council. There didn't seem to be a lot of support now for that on the council. The folks we're talking to are sort of making it sound like they'll see down the road. We were expecting 4 weeks of jury selection. They got the regular jury picked in the first 3 days, the 6 jurors. They need 3 more alternates. So that's moving a lot faster than expected. That would mean the mayor will be back for at least a few weeks of work before the trial begins. I think everyone's waiting to see just how long of a time commitment, but at this point, not a lot of support for Councilman Deutsch's resolution.
So there's a break after the jury's selected, and then it starts up a couple weeks later?
Right. Especially with the long trial, they want to give the jury a clear idea of what their schedule will be. So even if they finish fast with jury selection, May 12th, Judge Dewey says that's when they're starting.
And not sequestered or anything like that? They get to go home every night?
Nope, get to go home every night, yeah.
But told not to read and watch the media?
Oh, and it's, not to tweet, not to go on Facebook, the instructions changed by the day because the different ways you can get information. But, yeah, very clearly, anything about the case, they're not even supposed to tell anyone what case it is, just that they're on jury duty.
Yeah. Eric Parker making his debut as our legal consultant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Law student, and best of luck with you this week covering the trial.